Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton. I am intentionally encouraged when I see people doing business the right way. And for the last 15 years, Damon Burton and his team at SEO National have done just that. Now you might say, Brian, what can they do for me in my business? I'm going to tell you what they can do for you. They can help you understand search engine optimization. There are a lot of players out there in the marketplace, but you want a team of people that are going to be dedicated to working with you and helping you to understand search engine optimization and how you can show up higher on search engines so that you can bring more revenue into your business. Damon and his team are full of integrity, honesty, decency, and trust. And if that's important to you and that encourages you, I would encourage you to give them a call today at 855-736-6285 or go to SEOnational.com and get a free quote and tell them you heard about it on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Get ready for a dynamite conversation coming up right now on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
And welcome into the Intentional Encourager podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sexton. Thank you for joining us again today. Part 2. 1, we've already done. 2, we're getting ready to do. I love these 2-part podcasts, and it's something new that we're doing on the Intentional Encourager podcast because I really want you to see in different parts how people are and talk about different things. And so this podcast is no exception with the incredible Nancy Barrows, Nancy Barrows. You can find her on LinkedIn at Nancy Deborah, Debra Barrows. But right now, right here, see, I'm excited. Right here, right now, you can find her on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Nancy, if I haven't scared you to death, how are you?
Oh my gosh, scared me. I'm like, yes, let's do it. I'm wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for having me back. I do appreciate it.
No, listen, this is part 1 was dynamite. And part 2, I know is going to be great. You and I, let's start here. You and I were introduced by a mutual friend of ours, Tim Song. Tim's been a guest here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Tim's got a dynamic story. And let me ask you this before we get into your story, because I'm really curious about something with you. When you're coaching clients and other people like that, how reticent are people to dive into their own personal stories? Because it feels like that people say, well, I don't know if because I've approached people to have them on the podcast. And they'll say, well, I don't know if I'm ready to tell my story. I don't know if I really, because there was something that intrigued me. And I thought, well, if it intrigues me, it'll intrigue other people. But it feels like people are reticent sometimes to tell their story. How do you get your clients past that reticence of telling their story?
Well, first and foremost, it's the understanding of why that would be. Like, we know it's scary, and so many people are worried, if I put the true me out there, what is it going to mean for my business, for my work, for my coworker, people who don't know me on a personal level. And we're not often given permission to tell our story, which is one of the reasons I tell mine. Hey, go out there, tell your story. It's powerful, it's impactful. But often what it takes is conversation, right? About tell me your story. Tell me your story. Let me ask some questions. Let me remind you of the powerful things that I'm hearing, and talk about like what it is about this that makes it so scary. Like help me understand. Because how do we clear any of that if we don't know what it is you're holding back? I've never told anyone at work to, not everyone in my family knows, and again, coming back to, well, what's your why for sharing it? Let's focus on your why. Why do you want to share your story? What do you think the benefit is of sharing your story? Yeah. And that, it's the magic. I can't tell you exactly how, but in talking to someone about your story and really having them value it and see the importance of it, is a big permission. I've worked with clients, even, helping Tim and I worked together, and, he was doing a lot of business-based content. And, as a friend, I knew all this stuff about him,
Mm-hmm.
and just slowly saying gosh, it's such a powerful story. And actually the first thing he shared, because I said, well, how do you want to be seen? He's like, I want to be seen as an expert. I'm like, great. And he's like, was going to go buy the button down shirt and the blazer. And I'm like, forget that.
Yeah.
Like, let people see who you are. Let people see who you are, this other side of you.
You mentioned something, and we're going to get into your story, but something you just said there is incredibly powerful. You said it's the magic of telling the story. So I wrote in my book, I remember a time years ago when I was working in the food business, and David Copperfield was coming to perform at a local auditorium that we were at. Good sized auditorium, really, really nice venue. But I can remember we were talking to the chef, the sales rep and I that were working with the chef, and he was telling my sales guy, he said, can you get your truck here early, because when Copperfield's people come in here, they're going to take control of everything. There was no side views in this auditorium. Everything was straight ahead. They couldn't, there was nobody that could be back there when they were loading and unloading the different illusions, because there were things that he wanted to protect. And it almost felt like to me, okay, I know that this guy's a magician, but if he's really that talented, this is the way I felt. If he's really that talented, he's going to be like, I want to captivate you. Yeah, I mean, I don't want you to see how all the tricks are done. But to me, there was almost kind of like, I don't think so. But I know magicians use that to tell the story that they want to portray to the audience, right? Like, they can really make somebody levitate, or they can really saw somebody in half, or they can really do this or that. And I think sometimes as humans, we try to say, I want to tell you the story that makes me look more talented. I want to tell you the story that makes me look like a superhero. I want to tell the story that makes me look like somebody I'm not. And you mentioned that in the first part of our conversation, Nancy. You were talking about content curators and things like that. And when you said the magic of a story, that's immediately what I thought about. So how do we push ourselves? And I want to ask you this before we dive into your story, because I want to save plenty of room and time. How do you push yourself past the illusion of what your story could be and should be to the audience? I didn't ask it right. Let me ask it this way. Let me drop back and punt and ask it this way. How do you push your clients past trying to tell the story of an illusion rather than the truth? Because the illusion is probably going to look better. It's going to sound better. It's going to feel better. It's probably going to be all nice and fuzzy and warm, but it's not real. It's not what really happened. How do you push people past the illusion of the story?
So I think there's two important pieces to that. The first is creating brave space. We hear people talk about safe space. You can share, and it's a safe space. We'll all hold this space for you. And I work in brave space. I work in space that's not you, like I'm creating the safe space for you. I'm creating this for us. You're not going to go out on a limb by yourself. I'm going to share too. We're both going to get vulnerable here. And you're going to see how you don't look at me any differently in a negative way. In fact, most people then come away going, wow, like I never would have known, and you're so blah, 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 whatever. And just mirroring back to them, that's what you have to offer to someone else. That's what your story brings to this world. And, it's okay if you don't tell your story all at once. And it's okay if you don't get to the scariest part of your story first. With Tim, he was walking up a hill, and we were talking about, like his wanting to shift his business. And I said, hey, you're walking up a hill. I said, take a video. You're walking up a hill. We all are, right? We've all walked up a hill. We've all looked at the bottom, looked at the top, and gone, I'm just going to look at my feet, and I'm going to keep stepping and moving forward. And that was one of his first shares of personal content, right? Hey, I'm shifting, I'm growing, I'm changing, and I'm hiking up this hill again, kind of thing. And that was just enough for him to get that response from people who said, wow, the genuine you, we love you unconditionally. We accept you unconditionally. And that's, once you've had that, it's hard to go back, honestly. Once you start to peel away a little bit of the mask, it's hard to like stick it back on and go through life that way. When you've had this opportunity and you realize people actually, a lot of times people don't tell their story because they don't think anyone's going to be interested, right? Yeah. You're going to put something personal out there. Nobody cares. Well, guess what? You will be surprised. It not only is, it's the opposite. So many people are interested. So many people will be inspired. So many people will, for me, and I know it's happened for Tim and everyone else that I work with, you get contacted with DMs or thank you so much. I needed to hear that today. Or even in comments, I've had people say like, it's exactly what I needed to hear today. Our stories reach those who need it in that moment. And they live past us. Somebody may see me telling my story a year ago from somewhere I spoke or on a show, but it received them the day they needed it.
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton. Prices are going up by the day. We've got to find ways to increase our household revenue. Now, a couple ways you could do that is, one, you could go and ask your boss for a raise. But if that doesn't work, I've got another way for you. It's my friend Joe Hart's program called Products for Profit. Joe's been a guest here on the Intentional Encourager podcast and told his story about how learning retail arbitrage changed his life, and he's been helping thousands of people change theirs. Now, retail arbitrage is simply this. It's taking a product and buying it and then reselling it online for a higher price, and you keep the profits. And guess what? Amazon and Walmart use third-party resellers every day to fulfill their customer orders. I want you to go to productsforprofit.com or productsforprofit.carrd.co. Get connected to Joe's team. Tell him you heard about it on the Intentional Encourager podcast and start making money today with Products for Profit. And now let's get back to more great conversation on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
Yeah. That is so good. Yeah. Stories reach those that, and Nancy, here's the thing. There's connective tissue to everyone's story because you may not have walked exactly the path that I've walked, but I'm sure if we would tell each other our stories, there's some connective tissue there. So I want to be respectful and responsive and have you share your story and go as far back as you want to go, go all the way back because you have really, really overcome some things. That's encouraging. It's going to be encouraging. Folks, it's going to be encouraging and inspiring to you because you might be walking a similar road right now. I don't know. But Nancy,
you never know, right?
Yeah, I want to save plenty of room and time for you to tell your story.
My pleasure. It's actually a privilege for me to tell my story, and I tell it because I can. I don't think people realize that there are people who can't yet tell their story. And so that's why I do it. And my story is hard to receive, and I really give everyone permission to feel whatever they feel when they hear it, because I've had all those feelings too. Truly, in my journey, I felt all the same ways. And so I'm going to go back to the start. Because like anyone else in this world, what I've been through has made me who I am today. And so if I don't give you from the start, it doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of like, gosh, well, it seems too easy, right? It's not relatable. You like, and I say this all the time. If I would have seen me today when I was 20, I would have been mad at me. I would have been like, sure, fine. Look at you. You're successful. You're living life. You're happy. Unless we share the ugly, like snotty, unsexy parts, we're doing one another a disservice. So be prepared for that. So the big part of my early years, the story is that I was being sexually abused by my grandfather until I was 16 years old. And at 16 years old, it actually stopped because it got into the legal system. I didn't know there were laws against this. It had happened when I was so young, 4 or 5 years old, that, by the time I realized it was wrong, I had so much shame and guilt that I had let it happen, that I had never said no. And so, my whole life has been wearing a different mask to fit in. to make sure nobody wanted to look at me twice, to find out the secret that I was like hiding, literally feeling as if my life depended on it. And I was very lucky. My core family was safe and supportive and strong. And I had that benefit. And I say I had the best of a bad situation from day one. That supportive family. I did not live with my grandfather. So it wasn't there were extended periods of time where they would come stay with us. But, I was at a summer program and with a bunch of other 15, 16-year-old girls who were talking about the boys they like. And, she could kiss this one and that one, their first kiss. And the weight of what my history brought to the table in that conversation hit me like a ton of bricks. And I started to cry.
Can you remember the first time that you were aware that this was happening? Because here's the thought as I'm listening to this. The thought is, how does a grandfather find his granddaughter? And let's just say it. Let's just put it out there. How does a grandfather find his granddaughter to be sexually attractive?
Right. Well,
and abusive. The first time, what were your feelings like the first time you can remember that this was happening?
So my memories, and this is something I learned later, how many I was missing, but they are all around when there was a high probability of getting caught. And so the abuse had been going on for quite some time at that point. And I don't understand why he was taking bigger risks. For whatever reason, he was taking bigger risks. And I remember my grandparents had come to visit us from Florida. We were living in New York, and the upstairs of the house was shaped like a U. And so for those of you on YouTube, you could kind of see where at the tips of my fingers, there were 2 bedrooms. And then at the curve, there were 2 bedrooms. So these at the curve, you could see straight down the hall into the other one, basically. And I remember him pushing me down on my bed. And my mom and grandmother were unpacking in the guest room. And the whole time I was just like, please, just don't let them walk in. Don't let them see. Don't let them know. Please, please. And those were the memories, right? And it's like that paralyzed. I'm old enough. I know it's wrong. I just don't want. And if it's going to happen, if someone's going to see, just let me die right here. Just let it. And so I was older. I was probably more like 10 at the time. And yeah, I tell people, I don't know what he told me the first time that kept me quiet. I don't. Right. Who knows? As a young child, being shown love and affection, and being special, and who that could have been enough, right? It doesn't. The other thing you need to know is predators don't start off at the deep end. Yeah. There's a process that happens over time to make sure that they're quote unquote safe and whom they're going to victimize, and that person is ready to hold the secret. No matter what happens. And so, yeah, that was the first time that I really remember. And I was the youngest of all the grandkids. So it wasn't unusual for me to get left behind, because either I was too young or too little or whatever was happening. And then as I got older, people were off to school, college, sports, and I was still home. But all this happened. And at 16 years old, this secret I've been holding was like literally unleashed on my family. For years and years, I was hurting. Yeah. But I was protecting, in my mind, protecting the people around me. They didn't need to know. And I was really, really lucky that people made decisions that they probably didn't even realize at the time were going to be so impactful in my journey, where I was given choices. Because very often, right, someone tells you this, a kid, young person, and all the adults swoop in and take control. Yeah. Right. They're going to navigate this, and they're going to either try and minimize the impact on you, or tell you what to do, and here's the next step. And the system does as well, right? The system kicks in. So I was at a summer program. I was away from home, and the person there told me what was going on, that they had to tell, that they had to report it, and they could call my parents and let them know, or I could call and let them know. And this voice that's always been with me, that's so much wiser than my years, that got this girl through to being, 50 in February, was always there. And I'm so grateful for that voice, because that voice was the one that said, no, I want them to hear it from me. They're hearing something horrible. Let them hear it from my voice. And my parents, bless them, on the other end of a phone call, that their daughter says that she's been sexually abused for years.
Now, was this your maternal or paternal?
Maternal.
Oh,
It was my
wow.
maternal, yeah. So
And so, yeah, let's go there for just a second. And please forgive me for hijacking this.
you are good to go.
This is, this is your mother's father that is now doing and has done repeatedly. It's not been a one-time thing, over and over and over and over. How did your mom receive the news? And here's how I'm envisioning it, okay? I'm envisioning it as a dad being an in-law. My first reaction, if that were my daughter, is I'm going to kill him.
Oh, that was that.
He's a dead man.
Mhm.
And then your mother, this is my father, and he's been doing this to my little girl. So what was the reaction like from your mom and dad?
I will say that they were, for the most part, really good from shielding me. And it wasn't until I was older realizing like they were going through this with their daughter who, gosh, the things they saw me go through, devastating to them. They were also processing that they thought they had been good parents that were protecting their daughter. And now we're questioning everything they've ever done on top of processing, this impact. And they were pretty good about not letting me see too much of it, which was so brave on their part and so genius, because I would have taken responsibility for it. I did. Everything I did see, I took responsibility for, right? I was the one doing this.
Yeah.
And, to my mom's credit, she had no problem cutting ties with her dad. I was never questioned if it was real, if I had imagined anything. My dad and my brother both wanted to kill him. I remember my dad back in the days, a cord where you had the phone and you actually had to be attached to it. And my dad being on the phone with the airlines trying to make a reservation so he could fly to where my grandfather lived to kill him. And me like pulling on the cord, begging him, like hysterical crying, like, you can't, I can live without him. I cannot live without you. Like, I need you. And him having to live, you don't get your pound of flesh. And to this day, I'm out there telling my story and I'm talking about the confrontation, the depression, the anorexia that followed me around for years because I lost control of everything, because I was mad at my body, because, we're being frank here, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. Every cell in my body, sexual touch, pleasure. And these are the hard things for people to hear, right? That somehow my abuse could be pleasurable. But my body was built to do exactly what it did. Now, over time, that got completely separated and became a different story, right? I just didn't feel anything.
Yeah.
You disappear, or at least I did. But to this day, as I talk about my story, my mom can watch me on shows. My dad still can't, even though he knows like I'm good. He still can't. My brother still can't. Yeah. Like, it's still too, and I get it. Like, I respect everybody's place and where they have put this in their individual lives. Because it's by no means like my mom, when I first told my story, it was on LinkedIn. I was a week into LinkedIn and I was invited to a live telethon for like real authentic, like connection over convenience kind of platform. And I'm talking about childhood trauma, and it hits me. I'm like, Nancy, you're part of the problem. Like, if you can't say it, how can you expect anyone else to talk about it?
Well, the natural reaction from a parent would have to be, maybe it's hard for your dad, being a dad myself. And I'm just trying to step into those shoes. And your brother, I'm a brother of two sisters. It would be hard because in your mind, you think, if I had only seen, if I had only stepped in, if I had only known, I could have prevented this person that I love so dearly from having to walk down this road. It's the protection, and I don't mean to be chauvinistic. Please forgive me if I am being chauvinistic, but it's almost, it's a paternal instinct to protect. Mm-hmm. And when you can't, you feel helpless and vulnerable, and it's very painful. And I'm just trying, and I don't know if you've ever heard that or anything like that, but maybe that's what your dad has felt all these years.
Well, and I think he knows I'm fine, but he still wishes I had never gone through it.
Exactly.
And the reality is, I say I had the perfect family for me because in there they realized that the best way to protect me was to not seek revenge, was to really focus on me, what I needed, helping me get well, supporting me through the process. And that was how they could protect me moving forward. They couldn't do anything about the fact that it had happened. They were angry about it. They were, more than angry, like you said, truly murderous about it. But they focused on me. And that, the relationship I have with my mom and dad, and it makes me cry all the time. I'm so blessed.
Yeah.
Even now, like what we've gone through together keeps us in a very different, it brought us to a whole different level. And when I, say everybody says they think they have the best dad, I just know I do, they sacrificed so much for me and saw me go through so much. And when I started telling my story, I hadn't given anyone warning because I didn't know I was going to do it. I didn't ask anyone how they felt about it. Now, granted, it's my story, but it includes other players. And so I went to my parents separately and said, hey, I'm a little late on this, barn door open, but this is what happened.
Yeah.
And are you okay with it? And my parents, in their unique ways, as there are individuals, my mom said to me, which she had never said to me before, that she was so proud of me. Because what she had never said to me is she was worried I wasn't going to make it.
Wow.
And she had never said that to me. And she talked to me about these different places where she had seen me really in the depths of my dark. And one of them was I had court-ordered therapy in the very beginning.
This was after everything came out.
After everything came out. And literally, I'm 5'8", and I was able to crush myself into a ball, into the corner of the cat, like the smallest little bundle while we were in therapy. And
that's impressive because you're a tall girl, 5'8".
I am
My mom's
tall.
5'8".
And literally, I wish I had the face to show you. Like I was like without bones. I just, collapsed in on myself. My back was to the therapist. My head was in the cushions, and it just was like gone. And the second he was like, okay, well, we're done for today, I stood up and was like, I was always like, I was the girl they knew. And my mom, like for her, that was one of those moments like, oh gosh, like, look at what's going on inside my daughter.
Yeah. And this
how does she make it through this? Like, how does she get?
Yeah. And this started basically, forgive me for kind of jumping ahead, but I want to make sure that we cover all the bases.
I appreciate that. Yes.
This is kind of, once you have the court-ordered therapy, does the anorexia and depression, is that an offshoot of that? Did it come from that? And what was something that surprised you that you overcame? Because here you're 16 years old. You've already come through being sexually abused by your grandfather. Now all this has come out. The emotions that everybody knows, they're all coming at you, and you said your parents did a beautiful job of shrouding some of those, but you had to see some of those torrential emotions that were coming out. Your grandfather's probably going to prison for this. Take me through the anorexia and how that started and what kind of surprised you most about it as you look back?
So, yeah, anorexia started as like just restrictive eating. Like I started cutting things out that I would decide I didn't like them. And, it's like, oh, I'm not going to put cheese on my pizza. And then slowly became where, here I was thinking I was controlling my food and turning around one day and realizing it's controlling me. I couldn't eat even if I wanted to. Right. And it had gotten that bad. And the other side, the depression, like while I was like I said, my day-to-day life was happy and safe. And so I really walked this like chaotic line of when I was okay and when I would fall apart. And I didn't always know when it would happen. But I know that the precipitating episode to my darkest days was when I confronted my grandfather.
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton. You know, dreams are powerful pieces of intentional encouragement. We all have them. If you're a business owner, you've probably always dreamed of taking your sales to levels you've never seen before. I've got a guy that can help you with that. His name is Brad Norwood. My good buddy Brad has been on the Intentional Encourager podcast as a guest before, and he is a dream specialist. His company, Dream It Pro, offers incentive packages to travel to places such as the Masters, Kentucky Derby, the Super Bowl, even exotic places that you've always wanted to take your team, but you just didn't know how to do it. Brad's your guy. And oh, by the way, Brad's a certified bucket list coach, so he can help your team members achieve their personal dreams as well. I want you to go to www.dreamitpro.com and find out more, or call him directly at 479-466-6907. And by the way, tell him you heard it on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Let's get back to more great conversation here on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
And there's a longer story here, but ultimately he admitted to one instance where he had been inappropriate with me. And it was something I didn't remember. And that really sent me down a very dark path of, what else don't I know? Can I heal if I can't remember it? Like, what if I remember all, what if I can't handle it? Like, what if I remember all of it and it destroys me? Like, there's so much more. I'm having so much trouble with what I know. That was one. Two was, here someone took responsibility. I'd gone through all this therapy. I truly knew it wasn't my fault. Yet this person takes responsibility and I'm still stuck with all of the crap in my lap, right? I'm still the one that's going to have to go through therapy to reconnect with my body, to reconnect with trust, to relearn patterns and thinking, like we talked about in the first episode, of the way my brain worked. I had trauma brain. I still don't know my times tables by heart. There are just things that, would pop up for me or whatever. And so what's really surprised me most about this whole journey, because if you would have asked me at 20, I was broken beyond repair. And I was never truly suicidal, but I was always okay with dying. Like if I got hit by a bus and died, it would be okay. I would go to bed and pray that someone who's loving life tomorrow is going to get a terminal cancer diagnosis. Give it to me. Like, let them live the life they love. And years later, being someone who always thought that anorexia and being a survivor of childhood sexual abuse would be so much a part of my identity, it surprised me that I would go, until I started talking about it on LinkedIn, long periods of time without ever thinking about it. Like, it just wasn't even in my consciousness or even pop up through my stuff. I remember calling one of my college roommates for Cal one day because I was reading a book and it talked about this woman having an eating disorder. And I called her. I'm like, oh my God, like, it sounds ridiculous. So I said, oh my gosh, do you remember when I was anorexic? And she's like, oh my God, that's right. And we started talking, but she's like, oh, I used to put soy sauce and everything. But to be in a place where you truly didn't identify that, it wasn't in my life every day, that or the abuse, was shocking to me. I had a therapist tell me once, like, someday you're going to turn the page in your history book and this is not going to hurt the way it does now. And I really was like, you're funny. I pay you for this. Right. Yeah. But I truly can say, like, I don't have that pain associated. And because I'm sharing my story and helping others, it's actually become a very different association. It's become very positive. Now, when I tell people I wouldn't change it, there's always that moment of like, really? But really, when I got to a point in my life where I liked myself, I truly liked who I was and what I offered to the world, I was able to have gratitude for all of it, because without it, I wouldn't be the person I am today. And if you like who you are, right? Yeah, it sucks, but I also made it. I was lucky. I made it. I had the support, and it has given me superpowers that I get to share with others. So rather than this being this dark, tragic cloud that was over my head, it is now something like, I get to, use my experience, turn it around, right? I become the thriver. I'm not a victim. I'm not even a survivor. I'm the thriver who's helping others. And that's a really powerful place to get. And so the realization that I would not identify as someone who had been sexually abused, not identify with someone who had been anorexic every moment of my life was the most shocking piece of it. Now, my mood, I still struggle with. I basically complex post-traumatic stress disorder. My brain changed, then chemistry changed. So my mood is still something that I work on a daily basis. Mental wellness, all the therapy I've had isn't you get a plaque on the wall and congratulations, go have fun. I'm susceptible to the same things everybody else is in their daily life. I'm human and I still struggle with everyday human things.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, naturally you would have to. And here's the thing, Nancy. I think it's important to understand this, is that your story is unique to you and there is connective tissue there. And just because someone else is still trying to find their way in processing it doesn't diminish their, I think really what you're saying, if I could assume for just a moment, what you're saying is just because we're not we may have had similar things happen, and I may be here and you may be here, it doesn't diminish where you are.
And I tell people that all the time. People are like, oh, you're so much worse than mine. Like, you're sexually abused. You're like, I only have there's no comparing trauma, because the reality is trauma is the same for all of us. Trauma occurs when our system is overloaded. Right? Mm-hmm. It's overloaded and it can't handle what's happening. And there is a systematic, we can point to the symptoms of trauma because we all carry, right? We have that same structure in us that our brain takes over and our body does this. And so no matter what the trauma, we all experience trauma, and there are so many similarities. So it's not like mine's an A and yours is a D. There's no such thing. And sadly, there's an abundance of trauma, right? So there's not,
Yeah, and how people process. Look, and again, I'm in no way comparing what you went through to what I went through losing my dad. But people say it's like, well, you handled it. My wife said, you don't ever cry about it. And I'm like, but you don't know that the last 10 years, I am more susceptible to tears than I've ever been. I'll see something and I'll have to choke them back because I don't want to let that emotion bust forth. But again, I love what you said there. It doesn't diminish the trauma that each one of us have gone through in our lives. And it does encourage us that we all can overcome. So in the last couple of minutes that we have here together, share with me and this audience your biggest piece of intentional encouragement.
So my biggest piece of intentional encouragement is most of us have been living our story for so long that we don't think of it as remarkable or that it would help anyone in any way or that they think that they would, it would matter to someone. And I want to encourage you to share your story in the ways you're comfortable, because you have no idea the extent of the people and the power and the impact each of our stories has. Truly, mine is to make people feel seen, heard, and valued, right? And by telling my story, I'm letting people be seen. I am letting other stories be heard through mine, and not just sexual abuse, anorexia, depression stories, trauma stories. I am using my voice, which I lost during all of my abuse, right? Again, I've now found my voice and I can help other people find theirs. And my intention is really to allow us to all show up real, #radiating real, without those masks, and receive unconditional love and unconditional acceptance for who we truly are. And that in every moment, we are valuable beings. Even in our darkest of days, we are a valuable being, and we matter, we're important, and we make a difference to someone.
And I love the fact that #radiating real and #intentional encouragement have come together. Mm-hmm. And this has been beautiful. Nancy Barrows, what a powerful story. I am so grateful that you shared it with us. Go to LinkedIn and connect with her, follow her, Nancy, Nancy, Deborah. You want to find the right one,
Yes.
Debra, Barrows, Barrows. Nancy, again, my sincere gratitude to you. Thank you for joining me on the Intentional Courage podcast.
Thank you. And thank you for creating this space. And I invite everyone to join me and my co-host Brian Schulman live every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Pacific, and every Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific, where we are all about fun and sharing the good. So if you're needing that good, if you have some good to share, come light up somebody else's life, or come receive the positivity from the Positive Vibe Tribe.
And you never know when intentional encouragement might show up there. I mean,
come on. We would love it. That's what we do. We create space to shine the light on others and for people to be there for one another and really have a place where we're willing to be real, but what's good? Who made a difference in your life this week?
Yeah.
What's something, and I think there's a lot of that's missing.
100%. Nancy, again, I can't thank you enough for joining me on the Intentional Courage podcast.
Thank you for having me here.
My thanks as always to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And of course, the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through his word. If you're not subscribed to the Intentional Encourager podcast, hit the subscribe button wherever you get podcasts so you don't miss an exciting episode where you can get encouraged and stay encouraged. And remember, anyone, anywhere, at any time, any place can be an intentional encourager.